Today's thought of the day is from Desperate Resolve. It is from Silence Speaks, Master's Support. The disturbed state of mind is more often due to the tyranny of one's own heart and to a brooding nature. A habit once formed and strengthened by the force of will is usually most difficult to overcome. Sometimes it generally drifts man down to the lowest level of degradation. I again request you to try to extricate yourself from it by taking refuge in the lap of one who is ever ready to take you in his embrace. No doubt, on occasions, you do feel inwardly inclined to it, but then there is one thing wanting still, and it is a firm and desperate resolve. That is not very difficult. If undertaken in the right way, it is perhaps the easiest. Almost everyone is eager for it in some way or the other. To speak of myself, I would say that I never felt concerned with it, though to an outer view it may have been a mistake on my part, but this was due to my peculiar nature. I ever remained a blind devotee of him who I took to be my everything, and never bothered about what might be right or wrong.
Slowly,
Everything was absorbed.
just read slowly, allow
Okay,
it to sing. Or I will read, just hold on. You're going very fast.
sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Everything was absorbed in my thought of him and him alone. As for the worship of gods and deities, I never stood in need of them, nor do I even now. I wanted to secure my approach up to him and my end similar to his. Nothing else did I crave for. God had no doubt brought me into the existence and had bestowed me with powers and means to go on properly with everything, as it is with everybody. But the very things having been spoiled by our wrong handling have become impediments and serve for a wheel between the master and the servant. So we ourselves make the obstructions, and distraction is caused by our own things, actually. That's what he's trying to say. And we want to get out of the entanglements. Only thing required, he says, is firm will and resolve. You have to take a desperate resolve. Then only you can get out of these entanglements. But the very things having been spoiled by our wrong handling have become impediments and serve for a wheel between the master and the servant. That means your mind and the God inside you. Now, all our best efforts for the approach end in a mere tiny chink at the surface of the wheel. So, there's a pointer here. He's trying to say that all our best efforts, meditation, cleaning, bedtime prayer, 9 p.m. prayer, all our best efforts for the approach end in a mere tiny chink at the surface of the wheel. The wheel is the ego and all the grossness which are created between yourself and God inside you. That mere tiny chink at the surface of the wheel. Going beyond remains forever out of question. Generally, for everybody, going beyond the wheel and entering into the kingdom of God remains forever out of the question. Now, who may he be who goes beyond this chink? He's putting a question for all of us to think. Who he may be who goes beyond this chink? For me, at least, it was none but my master. Whom should I therefore be indebted to? To God or to my master? To me, the answer is quite clear, and I owe everything to my master alone. How is this debt to be paid off? The only recourse open to me is to serve you all as best as I can. I sincerely wish you all complete emancipation. He wants us total liberation. I mean, that means permanently suffering should go away. I sincerely wish you all complete emancipation. But where there is the rose, the thorn is also there. A seeker of roses is never afraid of thorns. Mahatma, that means in the path there will be difficulties, but if you're determined to tread the path and reach the goal, there will be difficulties and setbacks, but you should be, they're normal, it should be ready for it. For that only you require desperate resolve, because otherwise if the resolve is not there, any difficulty comes, any lack of progress in your meditation, you meditated for 20 years, still the mind is distracted, not able to stay naturally on the object of divine light, then you can get disappointed and lose interest in meditation. So that's sake, he wants us to have desperate resolve. But where there is the rose, the thorn is also there. A seeker of roses is never afraid of thorns. Mahatma Gandhi is said to have once remarked that the way to salvation lies through jail. I too had once expressed a similar view in a letter to my master, that the path of spirituality lies over stony ground and through thorny bushes. I had once been in such a state of extreme trouble and restlessness that I wrote to my master that if such had been the case with any man of worldly interest, he would have preferred to commit suicide. But due to the overpowering influence of my master, all this seemed to be pleasant to me. The point we have to note is there will be disturbances, there will be thorns and bushes on the way. There will be a lot of, mind will set up all sorts of obstructions. You will say, today you can miss meditation. What is the importance of cleaning? I'm always thinking about the master. Why should I clean? And then this earning money and name and fame is more important because otherwise society will find fault with me. My children, mind will give all sorts of rational explanations to practice sincerely. So, so we should not be afraid of the thorns. That's what, and when the thorns come, that is where your firm determination and resolve will help you to tread the path which is strewn with obstacles actually. But due to the overflowing, powering influence of my master, all this seemed to be pleasant to me. I choose a life of poverty, and the idea of having nothing but salt and bread was very charming to me. It is a matter of pity for me that none perhaps has so far offered me a chance to impart such a state to him. That means a state where you would be just happy with salt and just roti actually. In one case alone, I had once tried to force it upon him, but I had not gone far with it when I was directed from above to stop it. If I impart such a type of training to my associates, I think the gentle-minded amongst them will quietly slip away from me, while the rash-tempered may perhaps be driven to open opposition. In my case, I was so much absorbed in my own thoughts at the time that I felt delighted in partaking of the remnants of the dog's meal, not to speak of a person of low caste or untouchable, who is after all a human being. It is, however, a different thing that I never did have a chance for it. In my heart, I felt no difference between myself and the dog. This was my condition at the time when I was full with mental troubles. I owe it to my master for having trained me like that continuously for about 21 years. It was only after that period that I began to feel relieved, and the peace that I now enjoy is far greater in proportion to the amount of trouble I had at the time. The point is, nobody should be under the assumption that spiritual training and control of the mind is comes easily without serious and determined efforts. You should, like he says, fix up your goal, which should be complete oneness with God. Rest not till the goal is achieved. Unless you have that determination, and unless you you relax and become complacent, the path will not be easy. You will not reach the goal unless you have that firm determination to overcome it. Of course, in other places, he keeps on talking about how simple it is. He talks about you pick up a needle with the fingers, it is easy. And if you try with a crane, it is very difficult. Actually, God is very near to you, is nearer than your jugular vein, he says. Jugular vein is just next to your neck. So he's inside you only. So by simple and natural methods, you do meditation naturally, and I will support you. Then realization is a very simple thing. Other places he has talked, but this particular letter is written to some person. So let us learn some lessons from this letter also. Further, during that time, I was under the watchful control of my father, who, having smelt my inclination towards the divine, feared lest I should someday give up the home and the world for the sake of forest dwelling. For this reason, a strict check was imposed on me, and I was not even allowed to go up to my master. It was only about 10 times or so that I could have a physical approach to him in all my life. But I did not feel it much, since I had no time to spare for brooding over these unnecessary things. It was all due to the sense of feelinglessness which God developed in me through the kind grace of my master. That is, in fact, the wonder of man worship. So, in a way, we are also doing a kind of man worship, in the sense now we are trying to read the master, and then when you think about the master, then you'll all these thoughts which is written about desperate resolve, about how he felt that he didn't feel any difference between himself and a dog. All these ideas come to you. So when you can contemplate on such a guru who is unconditionally free from all bondages, then your mind also becomes like him. So this is, in fact, Babuji keeps on quoting Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Vitaraga Vishayam Vachitam. That means if you meditate on a guru who is himself completely liberated, or who is realized God, your mind also will become like that. Now, once we are reading about him and trying to think about him, think how much troubles he faced during his sadhana, where he felt like committing suicide, where he felt like living only with salt and bread, and where he feels that he could take the food left over by a dog and all that, then you know the humility and the effacement of ego which has happened in his. So when you think about him like this, your mind also will become like his mind. And if your mind can become like the mind of the master, your goal is achieved. You realized God, actually, because he was completely absorbed in God. So this is one. We'll read the next one. If any questions regarding this? So we'll read the next one and then we'll stop it. This article is titled Master Support. The world peace is the crying need of the day, and those at the top are trying hard to bring it about. But the means adopted for the purpose do not so far seem to promise fruitful results. The efforts for the establishment of world peace do not seem to be very effective, only for the reason that they are merely external, touching only the fringes of the problem. As a matter of fact, the world peace can never be possible unless we take into account the inner state of the individual mind. World peace is directly related with individual peace, for which the individual mind is to be brought up to the required level. If the individual mind is brought to a state of rest and peace, everything in the world will then appear to him in the same color. It is therefore essential to find out means for developing within every individual a state of peace and contentment. Thus, all that we have to do for the attainment of world peace is to mold the mental tendencies of the people individually. That means the proper regulation of mind so as to introduce into it a state of moderation. That is the only way for bringing peace into the world. It is therefore essential for all of us to develop peace of mind within our individual mind, individual self. But that being exclusively the scope of spirituality, one must necessarily resort to spiritual means for the purpose. One of the greatest specialities of Hinduism, as pointed out by Swami Vivekananda, is that it offers means and methods of attainment of nobler ideals of life to people of every taste, mentality, and talent. For this purpose, there is in it for some the worship of idols and images, for others that of gods and deities, and for still others that of God with form or without form, and so on. Further still, for those of higher capabilities, there are paths of upasana, bhakti, jnana, etc. For the attainment of still higher ideals, there is again the path of yoga, classified under different heads, including Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga. As for the attainment of liberation or complete freedom, almost all the great sages of the past and the present agree on the point that Raja Yoga alone is the path that ensures success up to the final point of human approach. And everyone dedicated to complete freedom must sooner or later come up to it. Sahaj runs closely along the lines of Raja Yoga, but with certain amendments and modifications to purge out superfluities from that system, hitherto known by the name of Raja Yoga. Since proper regulation of mind is essential for the attainment of inner peace, it is necessary from the very first step to look to proper molding of the tendencies of the mind, which usually remain disturbed by the effect of sense craving in man. This, in fact, must be the basic object of every sadhana undertaken for the purpose. No sadhana is of any avail unless it guarantees moderation in the mental tendencies of the sadhaka. The mind, which in its primordial state was pure and regulated, has now been spoiled and polluted by the overall influence of the senses. It is now to be corrected and set right. And for this, the responsibility lies solely upon the individual himself. So the overall influence of the senses, that means now we have to see, we see WhatsApp, we see movies, we see television news, we see television debates, and all that is a sensory input only. And suppose you put a question, he says even if you see a dance on the way and you think master is seeing, which is a constant remembrance you are supposed to practice, he says the attraction for the dance goes away and then you are back in the sacred thought of the master, he says. Are we practicing in the same way and are we having the same impact by that practice is the question you have to put. If you put the question persistently, the mind will turn away from bringing unnecessary objects through the sense organs into the mind and create a disturbed state of mind. So that is the food we eat is a kind of a food, ahara, through the sense organs, and it creates distractions and disturbances in the mind. So yoga in that sense is self-control only. Suppose you have because of old habits, you had a desire to watch the news program. You have to control it. And that controlling is viveka. And if you control it, then the energy which has gone out through the sense organs to see news or whatever this thing, that remains in your body and that will assist you in opening the chakras and then assist you in your travel towards the goal actually. So in that sense, we should make that effort. the mind, which in its primordial state was pure and regulated, has now been spoiled and polluted by the overall influence of the senses. It is now to be corrected and set right, and for this the responsibility lies solely upon the individual himself. Here he is not throwing the blame on the master. He is not taking his master's responsibility. He says the individual is responsible. Almost all sadhanas have basically the same purpose, which remains neglected. Methods of austerity, penance, and physical mortification, usually applied for keeping the mind under control, do not relieve it of its misdirected trend. They only serve to keep the evil subdued within, which might at any time burst forth when by chance the control is somehow relaxed. The real solution of the problem, therefore, lies not in controlling the mind by suppression, restraint, or mortification, but in a gradual molding which will relieve it of its misdirected tendency. So here, what Babuji is asking us to, in a very normal, natural way, gently turn your attention on the presence of divine light in the heart and rest your attention there. Keep on stretching that attention on that object of meditation. And when you feel that your mind has become distracted, without forcing or without condemning the mind or without feeling bad that you are an indisciplined fellow, without, self-criticism, gently train the mind and train the attention to bring back to that in a natural way. Again, you find it is traveling outside, gently bring it back. And with repeated practice, the thought flow on the object of meditation will become easier and effortless after some practice. Then it becomes effortless. Then you start enjoying meditation. So he is against austerity, penance, and physical mortification. Like people go on fasting, people, that he is not saying. Okay, go up. धर्मेश ऊपर जाओ, अभी नहीं. हाँ, हाँ. The real solution of the problem, therefore, lies not in controlling the mind by suppression, is against restraint or mortification, but in its gradual molding, which will relieve it of its misdirected trends. Next. Usually, people aim at stopping even the normal working of the mind so as to create a state of coma or insensibility. The gurus of today also, in their eagerness to create an impression upon people, apply similar methods, which as a matter of fact take us quite away from the range of spirituality. Their followers too, having lost their sense of discrimination, are incapable of judging it in various shades and colors. They grow fond of the colorfulness alone, and for their mechanical minds, they require only a mechanic guide to lead them on by mechanical means. The result is that they remain held up forever within the charms of their mechanical output. But they alone are not to be blamed. Really, they have got saturated with the stunning effect of the slow poison administered into them from platforms by colorful preachers who pose as saintly and world teachers of religion. The result is that they get addicted to different kinds of intoxication created by the use of certain drugs and ritualistic charms. The teachers also infuse into their followers the same intoxicating effect, which, being suited to the taste of their senses, is greatly relished. Such is the condition of the teacher and also that of the thought. The one soaked in the feeling of self-importance and pride, while the other is drowned in his desire for sense enjoyment, which they grossly misinterpret as a state of anandam. The sphere of spirituality, in fact, starts from beyond the range of the senses. And frankly speaking, I may say that a guru who has not transcended the limits of the senses is not at all a guru in the true sense. He can impart nothing but torpidity, which as a spiritual stage is horrible even to imagine. Sir was insisting on this. I mean, the trainer should at least have complete the sham and dam. Dam is the control of senses. Sham is a continuous tranquil state. And if you with practice you try to retain the tranquil state, dam comes. Dam is the sense organs and motor organs are controlled. And then he'll be able to help other people control their mind. I may say that a guru who has not transcended the limits of the senses is not at all a guru in the true sense. He can impart nothing but turbidity, which as a spiritual state is even horrible to imagine. At lower stages in Shahajahanpur, one often does feel a sort of absorption, similar in a way to that of slight intoxication. But it is definitely different from the state of turbidity mentioned above. This condition may more appropriately be expressed as a blissful state of calmness, unstrained by the weighty effect of the senses, which the Abhyasi feels himself completely dissociated from. This may, however, be denoted as a soul dance, which is a high type of dance. When a dancer gets completely absorbed in the dance, it comes at par with the dance of Lord Krishna, which possesses the merit of driving the onlookers into a state of ecstasy. But this type of dance is now quite unknown and obsolete. The ancient books also do not make any reference to it in clear terms. The Tandava dance of Shiva, though not exactly the same, was much akin to it, but it was of a grosser type. You see the very interesting this thing, the dancer and dance. You can't separate the dance from the dancer. So real magical performance happen there when there's total merging of the doer with the process of doing. Only the process happens. So the doer disappears from the thing. Whatever greatest inventions in art or researches or sports performances or like ballets or music, greatest masterpieces happen when the artist loses his sense of separateness. He merges into that. So spirituality is experience doesn't come just during meditation. Even if you're fully involved in any activity, like you're doing a surgery, you're totally absorbed in the act, you don't know you're performing. That is also a kind of a spiritual experience where the feeling of doership will not be there. Just the process remains actually. This is just by the way I'm talking. Sadhana has two aspects. One, the abhyas, and the other, the master's help. Abhyas is meant only for creating inner conditions which will be helpful to the abhyasi in attracting the flow of the divine grace. And this involves one's self-effort. But self-effort alone is not sufficient. It must be supplanted by the master's support. As a matter of fact, what we really stand in need for our ultimate purpose is only divine grace. Like now we have come on a Sunday morning and listening to the talk, it comes under the category of self-effort. You're putting an effort to listen to the words of the master. That comes under self-effort. But that alone is not enough. But self-effort alone is not sufficient. It must be supplemented by the master's support. As a matter of fact, what we really stand in need of for our ultimate purpose is only divine grace. But owing to one's inner complexities, it is almost beyond the capacity of a sadhaka to have it by himself. For that reason, master's help is indispensable. In earlier stages, divine grace flows into the abhyasi only through the medium of the master. As such, it is often interpreted as master's grace. Whether it comes through master's medium or direct, it is the same divine grace in both the cases. So long as the abhyasi is incapable of having it direct, it rests on the master to bless him with it. When he has developed the capacity to draw it direct, the master's job is practically over. Though even then, he has to keep a watchful eye on him for the sake of safeguard. This is in fact the real function of a master. Now the master's support being an essential feature of sadhana, it becomes incumbent upon the abhyasi to seek a worthy guide to lead him on, helping him by his power transmitted through the yogic process of pranavati. This is the only effective means for bringing about the desired result. Under Shahajahanpur, the divine grace is directed towards the abhyasi through the process of pranavati. As a matter of fact, what pranavati does for the spiritual uplift of the abhyasi in the shortest possible time, independent efforts cannot do even in a full decade. Serious difficulties often arise when meditation is practiced independently in accordance with the old methods prescribed in the books. Under the old system of abhyas, one has to keep on struggling with the mind in order to stop its unceasing activities. The struggle continues all the time without any success in the real sense. Thus, practically, there is no meditation at all, and all the time is lost in mere struggling and suppressing mental modifications. In order to overcome this very great difficulty, under the Shahajahanpur system, we simply connect ourselves with the power of the master, whose mind has become thoroughly disciplined and regulated. His power then begins to flow into the individual, thereby regulating his mental tendencies. Pranahuti is therefore of primary value in giving the abhyasi surest success. Only our tiring labor for ages and lives can be saved only when, by God's grace, we are able to get a master capable of helping us through pranahuti. I therefore advise you in all earnestness to seek for such a one for your guide. They are, however, rare, but definitely they are there. And a true seeker, if he is really earnest, can never fail to trace one out. I do not hereby mean to advocate in any way the orthodox idea of Gurudom, which to my view is nothing but mental slavery. In our system, we have it in the form of common brotherhood with the spirit of mutual love, service, and sacrifice, which are the very essentials of the pursuit. We strongly condemn the idea of personal service demanded by gurus on the grounds that thereby the followers shall be developing pious samskaras in them. On the other hand, we uphold the view that a teacher acting in a spirit of service should himself serve the disciple, not only spiritually, but also physically if the need arises. The selection of the proper guide or guru is the next point to be taken into consideration. The guru's job being the most significant and invaluable factor of spiritual life, it is absolutely necessary that due precaution be taken to select the right type of man for the guide. The slightest error in this matter may often prove highly disastrous. God alone is in fact the real guide or guru, and we all get light from him alone. But only he who has cleaned his heart to that extent feels it coming therefrom, while a common man engrossed deeply in material complexities feels it not. He therefore stands in need of one of his fellow beings of high caliber to help him in that direction. We may call him guide, guru, master, or by whatever name we like, but he is after all a helper and a supporter working in the spirit of sacrifice and service. Spirit of service and sacrifice. His role is by far the most important, for it is he who, as a matter of fact, pulls the real seeker up and enlivens him with the light which is lying in him under layers of grossness. The light thus awakened begins to first to cast its reflection upon outer coverings and removes grossness and impurities therefrom. By and by it goes on developing, affecting the deeper layers also. The light can, however, be awakened by independent efforts as well, but that requires persistent labor for many years together. For this reason, association with a worthy guide is of immense value to the abhyasi, since the master too is duty bound, keeps on removing obstructions and impediments on the path. If the guru comes out into the field as a master puffed up with feelings of greatness and superiority, it is obvious that he has usurped the position of the real master, God. As such, it is quite definite that he cannot benefit others to the required extent. It is therefore essential for him to think of himself as a humble being and act in the spirit of love and service. He must completely devote himself to the service of his fellow beings, both individually and collectively. The service may be physical as well as spiritual. Spiritual service he must always be occupied with. Physical service too he must ever be ready to perform if needed. He must be thoroughly devoid of feelings of greatness, self-importance, and pride. He must not be a mere preacher of theories, but a practical man who has traversed the entire distance up to the final limit of human approach and has completely merged in the state of infinity. Such a man alone can be the fittest to act as guru or master, to take the abhyasi along the path of spirituality. In that case, the spiritual force keeps on radiating automatically all the time from him and affecting those around him. But special beings are nature's gift to the world. They come into the world only at nature's will to work as a medium for nature's work. Such a high soul is to be sought for if possible and available. Otherwise, one must get himself attached to the next highest personality available and accessible. By merging himself in his expansion, the Abhyasi can acquire corresponding expansion for himself. Every saint or yogi has his own expansion up to a limit, great or small. But when the seeker's thought is firmly fixed upon divinity, divine force thus enlivened in him brings about the greatest expansion. At lower levels, the expansion is less. In our sanstha, every abhyasi has his own limit of expansion, which is in accordance with capacity developed by him. For establishing a direct connection with the divine, it is therefore absolutely essential for an abhyasi to connect himself with the greatest personality of the type in existence at the time. The attainment of a perfect being is, in other words, the attainment of God, and the scriptures too support this view. If such a type of personality is not accessible at the time, then the only proper course would be to connect himself with one who is duly connected with the great personality. For when the best is out of reach, the second best must be approached. The master of the highest caliber is indispensable for another reason also. In our march, spiritual march, we proceed from point to point, crossing from one point to another after covering the intervening spaces known as buffers. These intervening spaces are to be crossed in order to gain access to the next point. But while crossing them, it is necessary to take a thorough tour through the entire space in order to complete its experience or boga. No further ascent can in any way be possible without it. Now, if one tries to attempt it by mere self-effort, he gets hopelessly involved in its intricacies and remains held up indefinitely within it. There may, however, be exceptions, but they are very, very rare, and that too only when one is specially gifted with an extraordinary caliber and is favored with the divine grace. Now, the power that can take us safely along through all these intricacies can definitely be one who has established an irrevocable connection with the divine source. Is it not thus necessary to have him for the purpose? Definitely yes. Whether you call him your master or your servant, he is after all your teacher or guide. In the popular sense, a guru, no matter whatever capacity you might take him. The buffers or the intervening spaces between points are innumerable. They are all to be passed through during the course of our journey. With the help of a worthy master of caliber, the process of boga is considerably reduced, and the abhyasi's stay at these places is much shortened, saving thereby a lot of time and energy. It may, however, seem somewhat strange and unnatural as to how boga gets ineffective in the presence of Guru's support. The fact is that the condition of the place where the abhyasi is staying entraps him completely, forming a sort of network around him. Unless that is shattered, the higher ascent is out of question. But by mere self-effort, one might at times advance a little, but only to slip down again. Practical observation goes to show that most of the buffers, most of the sages so far have not been able to cross these buffers, except perhaps only a few of the early ones. They remained lingering indefinitely in one or the other without finding a way out. The simple reason for that could possibly have been lack of proper capability and caliber on the part of their guru to clear it for them by their own superior power. Those depending upon their self-effort alone remain held up at the very first or second stage. How the necessity for boga does not arise when having the master's support is not very difficult to understand. Really, boga refers not only to the undergoing of the effects of the past doings, but also to the undoing of the effect of the network one has got entangled in. Only when that is torn off is the abhyasi able to go up to the next point, and that is possible only with the help of the master. The purpose for which I have taken up this point is to clear the wrong impression held by certain people that it is possible for one to conduct one's spiritual training by oneself. That may be possible only to a certain limited extent, and that too when one is gifted with special capabilities. Beyond that, it is quite impossible and impracticable. The only solution can therefore be to seek the help of one of the fellow beings who is really capable. The selection of a worthy guide is no doubt a very difficult job. On the basis of my personal experience, I may give an easy method of judging the worth. When you happen to come into contact with one, try to understand whether his association promotes in you a feeling of peace and calmness, and whether the restless tendencies of the mind get silenced, at least for the time being, without causing any weighty effect upon the mind. If it is so, you must conclude that he can be a fit person to lead you on the path. There is another difficulty as well. It is that even though such a master is available and accessible, he is not usually trusted unless he displays some striking miracle. A Rajayogi endowed with the power of transmission can no doubt display miracles, but he never likes to do so, since that will be derogatory to his pious position. Moreover, practical experience thoroughly proves that miracles are of no account at all, since they do not promote real faith in any way. We have the example of Christ before us, who displayed miracles all his life. But in spite of all that, he got only 12 disciples, amongst whom there was even one who subsequently contrived to bring about his crucifixion. That shows that his miracles were of no avail in promoting faith among people. It was in fact his noble teaching alone that afterwards secured for him such a large following. It is therefore better and in our best interest to have our eyes fixed upon reality rather than upon miracles, which are undoubtedly very petty affairs and can be displayed by persons of inferior attainments and common talents. Miracle is no criteria for a saint or a yogi. It is, on the other hand, a deliberate fraud played by dexterous gurus upon the weak and credulous people to entrap them in their old fold of Gurudom. Before deciding about the final selection, one must be fully convinced of the man's capabilities and merits with regard to his practical attainments on the path. For this, one must have continued association with him to judge things through perception and experience in a practical way. When one is thus convinced, one must then trust him in good faith and rely upon him firmly. This is very essential for a successful pursuit. By and by, faith, the most lively factor of spiritual life, begins to develop in one, and the master's form becomes predominant in his view, with his remembrance in the background. Master's remembrance is an important factor in overcoming the distraction of thoughts, and it is indispensable for easy success. When remembrance is there, the remembered must also be thereby. This leads the Abhyasi to a plane where he feels himself knocking at the doors of the beloved. When the beloved is convinced that it is a devoted seeker knocking at the door, he will himself come to the door to take him in. In that way, the limitations that bar our passage break off and we find access up to him. That is, the wheel is completely torn off. It's not a chink which he talked in the beginning. The wheel is torn off by God himself to pull you inside. But we can have full understanding of it only when we have experienced it in a practical way. At this stage, one begins to imbibe godly attributes. That means we have then come into the sunshine, which comes down from the main source. We have thus come up to the source. We are now in the ocean of infinity, and our swimming commences. Everything is now gone. And remembrance, having been transformed into subtlest state of surrender, supplemented by silent craving and dormant restlessness, is now the only means left to us. The state is completely devoid of charm or taste, but there is a peculiar attraction in it to the extent that one would not like to part with it even for a moment. For myself, I shall never be prepared to barter it even for my life. It is, however, the beginning of reality, where even purity, peace, and bliss are extinct. Now, if one person gets absorbed in God and another in his material manifestation, what will each of them attain? The one, the reality, the other, the imitation. Ante, power, money, and name and fame is imitation. You're looking for happiness in name, power, and sensual pleasures. That is a reflection of God. That means you're thinking that your reflection in the mirror is a real thing. You're trying to catch the reflection, which is a zero-sum game. I'm talking to Srinivas, he's sitting next to me. We had the same discussion just before talking about this book reading.
Okay.
The one, the reality, and the other, the imitation. Can God be blamed for that? Certainly not. The divine flow is the same in both the cases, but each of them partakes of it in accordance with his capacity and merit. I feel myself one with all my associates, being attached to the same common master God, without the slightest idea of being high or low, great or small. As a matter of fact, one in the human form, though considered to be big or great in respect of humanity, may be really the smallest. In fact, his very smallness may itself constitute his greatness. Though in his personal capacity, he may be no more than a zero. And zero has its own importance, since when added to a number, it raises its value 10 times. This is what devotion may finally bring us up to. My heart is offered as a playground for you all. Never mind whether one uses it as a recreation ground for his amusement or as a dreary waste for him to wander madly in. Let him use it in any way he likes. It is free for everyone to settle in a place where one might see his own reflection, while another sees that of the beloved. Uniformity is the characteristic of nature, and every one of has his due share of it. God is known to be both Samavarti and Samadarshi. A real master too must have his heart full with the feelings of uniformity. Otherwise, he is not worthy of the job at all. I think this ends a very long topic, actually.
Yeah.
We have read it earlier also, but we have to keep reading it because the influence of the world and the influence of Maya is so powerful. If you become complacent, there is a word Patanjali talks about obstruction. It's called pramada. Pramada is complacency. You feel that you can achieve, you relax your efforts. And that is one of the obstruction. So if you read these things, then these thoughts can motivate you to try very seriously to achieve the goal, because we are all vulnerable to old age, vulnerable to disease, vulnerable to death, vulnerable to what we like most dear, our wife, children, property, and all that. One day we'll be losing all that. So, so time in that sense, if you contemplate on the precariousness of our existence, then there is an increase in motivation. There's a sense of urgency to practice sincerely when you're fit and healthy, actually. So all these, if you read again and again, it motivates you to practice with a sense of urgency. Of course, patience is also required, but otherwise we may be losing precious time, actually, in very silly pleasantries. Okay, any questions about this? I mean, it's straightforward article. धर्मेश और कुछ है क्या?
No, quite a long article, but yeah.
Very long article, but important.
Yeah, very important.
Because the buffers and then the intricacies, and till you get direct access to the divine, you require the help of God, actually. So, and help of a master, and directly you require tremendous determination and willpower and talent, and then surrender, all those things which gross mind cannot do. Gross mind only creates grosser complexities. We'll end up in more problems. So if you trust Master and his teachings, since he has introduced his light into all the abhyasis through proper channels, through his representatives or preceptors. So the light is present in all of us. By just sticking to his practice and sticking to the 10 commandments, other time when you're not practicing, you try to live up to the 10 commandments, then the light which is infused into our hearts will get the sufficient energy or oil to say, and then the flame, keeps growing in intensity. And then finally it will destroy all your impurities and ego also. Ego also is completely, the feeling of, basically the yoga is oneness. Oneness means you should feel one with God, and God is present in all animate and inanimate things. So that is a truth. But due to ego, or due to avidya, as a result of avidya, immediately ego comes. You feel a division. You feel that you are separated from the world. You feel that, like in Shushupti, deep sleep state, you know that you are free from all anxieties, worries, because there is no division. The mind has merged into oneness. When the division comes, you will feel pain and misery and all that. So oneness is there, pain will be there, but there will be nobody else there is no subject to feel that pain. Pain is a natural phenomena, that's all about it. It comes and goes. But there is no duality or a division between the person experiencing the pain. Only the experience of pain remains, that's all. So yoga basically is a layavastha. That means you move towards greater and greater unity, actually. So first step which Babuji talks is the summarization of the senses. That means you rise above likes and dislikes. So one thing is swadhyaya. That means diary writing is you have to know whether your reason about your likes and dislikes. It can be anything. Even liking about a particular way of thinking also is an attachment to thoughts also. That is a subtle like, actually. If you value that you're doing better abhyas than the other fellow does not practice correctly, that is a crude way of pride and vanity. But then there can be subtler varieties, actually. You are a good meditator, you are enjoying a lot of peace and tranquility. That awareness is also a division, because you are experiencing extreme stillness of the mind, extreme tranquility, you are feeling tranquility. So your feeling means there's a division. So even that also will go away. So that should be reflected in your diary, actually. So coarser realization which Babuji talks, summarization senses, you can clearly know whether you have gross liking or disliking with the various situations in the world. Then later on you will be, then that's a kind of an inferior type of super consciousness, a kind of Turiya state. And Turiya state, he keeps on saying, D1 is a finer type of Turiya state, D2 is a much finer, D3 is he says, reserved for divine beings, and then I'm taking you all to the central region he's talking. That means that extreme subtle super fine super conscious is existing inside us. Only the craving you should have to realize and feel it yourself practically. So that is a basic point, actually.
So it's that, yeah, we get satisfied with the experiences, right? With the bliss and the
That means you're
happiness.
not clear about the goal. I mean, you should disappear from the scene. Only God should remain. That means you're enjoying means you're there, no? Ego is there. So how can you say that means you're not understood the nature of the goal. Oh, Master, thou art the real goal of this thing. That means nothingness is telling, no? We have to pralaya. That means you have to move towards nothingness. You have to become zero. Kshobh, the vibration has come, you have to go back to that Kshobh. In between enjoy karke bole to, that means you not have a clear goal clarity at all. So you have to read goal of life again and again. అంతేగా సినిమా ఇంకేమైనా ఉందా?
ఇమిటేషన్ కూడా చెప్పారు. సేమ్ ఫోర్స్ ఇస్ గోయింగ్ త్రూ యోగి అండ్ సేమ్ ఫోర్స్ మెటీరియల్.
సేమ్ ఇప్పుడు ఎఫికసీ ఆఫ్ రాజయోగ చదివితే ఇట్స్ వెరీ క్లియర్. We are all interconnected. There is no such thing called inanimate and animate. Inanimate forms are all come from the same one source only. He makes it very clear in efficacy of Rajayoga. But because of the mind is gross, you feel you're separate from animate and inanimate things also. You feel you're a separate individual and you can influence the events in the world for your favor and all that. You're part of the world. You cannot you can influence to a certain extent by your thought pattern, but you cannot control. You're part of the whole creation actually. ఇది చదువుతా మననం చేస్తే we'll improve our practice. చూడు ఆయన డెస్పరేట్ రిజాల్వ్ లో ఎంత థార్న్స్ కూడా ఉంటాయి, బట్ ఎ పర్సన్ who wants to pick up the rose is not afraid of the thorns. So any obstructions are there, like a soldier, any obstruction is there, he will not morcha chhod ke bhag gaya ke jaisa nahi rehta. He will not leave the post and run away because the enemy is superior. He will fight for the goal which has been given to him. So we are like soldiers. Soldier metaphor is important because soldier never thinks that he is going to die in the battlefield. He says he'll come back in the battle and meet his wife and children. He'll never go with the idea that he will die in the battle. So he uses the word soldier for abhyasi. He should be like a soldier. Soldier means you achieve success, that's all. You will never entertain an idea that I will die in the bargain, I will not succeed. The idea of failure will not be there. He may die in the process accidentally, some arrow or gun, but he will never think that. So he uses that metaphor quite, he uses Spartan hunted. You should be like soldier in the field hunted. All those ideas are helpful. Anything else, Dharmesh? Anybody else wants to contribute to the discussion and all? If not, we'll meet next Sunday again.